And it is my very humbled honor on this day, the 21st day of January in 2022, to present the NASCAR Hall of Fame inductee ring and officially induct my close friend, Charles Red Farmer, into the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
Thank you. You know, I'm going to take a little time here tonight. I hope y'all had you something to drink, been to the bathroom. Because I got 75 years of racing I need to talk about. So I'm going to start off in being appreciated this honor to be voted into the Pioneers Hall of Fame. And that means that I got to race against some of the great drivers back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. It started off in 1953 down in Hialeah Speedway racing, and the man come up to me and said, "Red," said, "I got a Hudson on my car lot. If you'll take it to Daytona and run it, I'll give it to you." You know, I've never been off a little short track in my life. I said, "Well, go to Daytona. That's a 5-mile track. I don't know what to do." Anyway, I went down and got that Hudson. We put a roll cage in it. I didn't have a tow truck or a trailer. Me and my mechanic, Wayne Cackley, put a suitcase in the back seat and a toolbox in the trunk, and we got in that car, and we drove that Hudson all the way to Daytona, my race car, 350 miles, listened to the radio. But I got to Daytona, I knew I had trouble. I didn't realize I had a straight 8 with an automatic transmission, and they was running Hudson Hornets with 2 carburetors on them, and with 4 speeds. So I knew I had to have some information. I went around to some so-called big shots, I'll call them, hot dogs, to try to get some information for some help. And everywhere I went to one of them, they'd have a rope around a pit area with a guard. And I come up and say, try to get some help, talk to him, said, and I pretty well got going down the road, "Boy, we ain't got time to fool with you." That attitude. And after about 4 or 5 of them, I was pretty well disgusted. And I ran across a guy named Ralph Moody and told Ralph what my trouble was. And Ralph stopped and took 10 minutes, told me about the air pressure, how to get down the asphalt down the back straightaway, get through the turns, how to run on the beach course, and run that thing. And he said, "What kind of wheels you got?" I said, "Well, just wheels come on it." He said, "Well, I tell you, Red," said, "we run wheels that are double plated, and we run big lug nuts off of trucks." He said, "If you got stock wheels, that you're going to break a wheel off for the race. You come off of turn 3 or turn 2 and hit that asphalt sideways, you're going to break a wheel." Well, anyway, to make a story short, that hit me so much, the way it happened. And I said, "Well, I'm a nobody, and I may always be a nobody. But if I ever become a somebody, I'm going to remember Ralph Moody. And if any kid comes up to me or person comes up and needs some help, I'm going to make sure I take time to talk to him and help him as much as I can, because I want to be like Ralph Moody." And that's what I've tried to do my whole career. I've been my whole career trying to do that, and I guess I've accomplished some of it. I've got 4 more popular driver awards, but those mean much to me as any trophy I've ever won, for the simple reason, when we got my popular driver awards, you had to be a NASCAR member, not a fan club or a public. You're a NASCAR member to be able to vote for it. So that means the peers and the people I raced against voted me the most popular. So they mean the world to me, those particular awards I got. Anyway, come back to 1956, and I come back from overseas after the Korean War. John Fitzgibbons, that I was driving for when I went into service, said he wanted to buy a car for me again. So we went up to Miller's Speed Shop in West Palm Beach, Florida, and he bought a car, C97 Ford sedan, that's gold and white. I campaigned that car in '56 and ended up winning the national championship, my first one in modified. At the end of the season, we changed the C to an F because it was for Fitzgibbons and Farmer, because Jack Choquette was driving it when they had the C on it. So I've had that F97 on my car, gold and white, ever since 1956, and it's still on it today. But, in 1956, they had a Sportsman modified race, started 136 cars in it on the beach course. And they didn't know how to inspect them, what they was going to do about it. So they come up to us and told us, drive down the beach to the exit and drive up on the A1A highway and turn right, go down about a block to the Neptune Drive-In. I said, what? Yes. Well, anyway, we went up there and turned out and went into Neptune Drive-In to the entrance. About halfway down there, you know, they got a projector booth up there on top of the popcorn stand at a drive-through. Of course, you know, people may don't know what they are. But anyway, we drove over there and pulled up in front of the popcorn stand, and the NASCAR officials come out of the popcorn stand to inspect the car, walked around it, took them about 30 seconds. I think the only thing he was checking to make sure it had 4 tires on it, and come back around the side and looked under there and see how many carburetors you had on the car. If you had 1 carburetor, they put an S up on the roof. If you had 2, they put an M up there for modified. And after that, it did take a minute for the inspection. We drove out through the exit, back to the racetrack again. Now, can you imagine NASCAR officials coming out of a popcorn stand and inspecting your car? And nowadays, it takes them 4 hours. But anyway, that was 1956. 1958, the last race on the beach course, they ran a 200-lap race on the beach. That's when they really had some of the great drivers of NASCAR. The last race before they opened up the speedway. They started 72 cars on it. Glenn Wood was on the pole, but he ended up Banjo Matthew won it. Glenn Red second. Fireball Roberts was 4th. And I think Ralph Earnhardt was 8th. Ned Jarrett was 9th. And I was 14th in it. And then some of the great drivers, Marvin Pinch and Curtis Turner, Joe Weatherly, Lee Petty, Buck Baker, they were some of the great drivers of NASCAR that I had the honor to be able to race with. And then they opened up the new track in '59, and then you think they have the big one now at the super speedways. We had one the first race in '59. They opened that track, Sportsman Modified race. We went into turn 1, and the caution flag come on. We come back through 3 and 4, and I know there was 25 cars wrecked sitting down there between 3 and 4. One of them up on the roof, the wheels still turning around. So they had the big one started off early in NASCAR in '59. They didn't wait till now. Then in '62, something that really changed my career, a man come to me named Von Burrell. Coming up to me and said, Red said, at that time there was about 35 Chevrolets racing on the racetrack, the hill with the injectors on them. He said, if I got you a Ford motor, would you put it in your car? And I got thinking, I said, well, it's a free motor. I think I'll do that. So I took that motor. He went to Holman Moody and bought a 427 cubic inch motor, bought it back, and I set it alongside my little Chevrolet motor. I said, it was twice as big as it was. I said, it must weigh 300 pounds more than that Chevy. So there wasn't no rules. So I moved it back 6 more inches behind where the Chevrolet was mounted to try to make up for the difference. I went out there to Dixie Speedway, started dead last because I missed a couple of races getting the car ready, and passed the whole field and won the race. Mr. Burrell come over to me and said, Red, make sure you put Long Lewis on that quarter panel next week. Me and Mr. Burrell shook hands on a sponsorship in 1962. Long Lewis Ford's still on my car today, 60 years later, on a handshake. I know that's got to be the longest sponsorship in racing because nobody ever had one sponsor for 60 years. So, but like I say, it was done on a handshake and a gentleman's agreement. You ought to be able to do business that way to me. But of course, there's so much money nowadays, you got to have lawyers and contracts. And then I come back in '69 and won my first sportsman championship. I won it again in '70 and told the guys, I said, no more, boy. We've been traveling all over the country, pulling open wheel trailers with station wagon and pickup trucks. And I said, it's about wore out. I said, we're not going to do this no more. I go to Daytona in '71, and what I do, I win the Permatex 300 and leading the point standings right off again. I said, well, here we go again. But that race was always the best race in my career for one reason. My mom lived in Miami at the time, and I was living in Alabama. And she hadn't been to a race in maybe 12 years. And I got her to come up to Daytona for that reason. I said, Mom, come up here to Daytona this year. And Mom my mama got to go to Victory Circle with me, and it was February the 13th, and it was her birthday. So my mom got to go to Victory Circle with me on her birthday, and I win the first permit test. So that's always been a special race to me, to be able to have my mom in Victory Circle, especially in Daytona. So in '74, Mr. Burrow, they bought me a '72 Torino. We put it together in the backyard, and I finished fourth in the Talladega 500 in '74. And then the next thing I could tell you, in '84, I won the ARCA 500 at Talladega Super Speedway, which is my hometown track. It's only 60 miles from Hueytown. And that meant a lot to me to be able to win that on that Super Speedway. And then in '88, I come back and I won it again. And this time was really special because my crew chief and the guy on the radio that was calling the shots and on the car was one of my best buddies and best friends that I loved him more than anything in the world, was Davey Allison. And Davey was my crew chief on that race that I won in ARCA again in '88. And in '92, I had something happen. Larry McReynolds called me and said, "Red, what are you doing 2 weeks from now?" I said, "What do you mean, Larry?" He said, "Well, me and Robert talked it over. Davey's got to be in Phoenix, and we need you to come down there and test our car at Talladega. We're going to bring 2 cars down there and test for 2 days to try to get Davey's car ready for Daytona. So we need you to drive it." Well, that was quite an honor, because I was 60 years old when he asked me to do that. So we went down there and spent 2 days back and forth, jumped out of one car and the other car, back and forth, sometimes an hour. I never took a helmet off. I was from one car to the other, back and forth. We got to Daytona with the car. Davey come down there and says, I told Davey, I said, "You got a couple of good cars." So Davey went out in the primary car, and it was super fast. He was coming in and tickled to death. He said, "We're going to win the race in this car." I said, "Well, you can do that." Well, anyway, he got wrecked in the Thursday races, tore the car up pretty bad. They brought the car in on a wrecker. Davey looked at it, and he almost cried. I mean, he had tears in his eyes. He said, "We could have won the Daytona 500 in that car." And I said, "Davey, you can win it in the backup car. It's just as fast. It's within 1/10 of a second what that gun, but you're just going to have to work a little bit harder. It didn't drive quite as good as the other car." So sure enough, Davey comes on and he wins the 500 in the backup car. And what the race meant so to me, Robert Yates and them gave me this Daytona 500 ring along with the rest of the crew. So that ring right there, I wouldn't take $1 million for that ring. So that was in '92. So I was running the ARCA race that again, and I qualified like third fastest, but I got in a pile up about the 5th lap somehow and got the car tore up. My family come to me, my wife and them, because they said, "You've been racing this super speedway for 32 years. Why don't you just quit the super speedways and go back and run short tracks and have a good time and enjoy the rest of your career?" Well, driving ARCA races in the '80s and '90s was like sitting in an electric chair with a drunk playing with a switch. You knew it was going to happen. You just didn't know when. So I gave up the ARCA and went back to my short track racing. So I got to thank my wife, Joan. She did a hell of a job raising my 3 kids, Bonnie, Cindy, and Mike. They all turned out great. And a racer's wife has got a tough job, especially when you're racing 4 nights a week like I was and spending the other 3 days trying to get it race run 4 more. So you got to be a mama and a father both to kind of raise those kids. And in fact, today is my son's birthday. Today is his birthday. So, but anyway, my wife passed away 7 days after our 65th anniversary, and that was in 2015. But I was kind of fortunate enough to find me another racer's wife, one of my best friends that I raced with, Jerry Goodman, for 35 years. He passed away 12 years ago, and of course my wife passed away 7 years ago. And me and Judy, his widow, got together, and we got married 2 years ago Christmas. So I got another racer's wife. they said, well, how come you got married on Christmas? I said, well, if I married on Christmas and anniversary the same day, I only got to buy one present. But anyway, I got to thank all my sponsors. You know, you can't race without sponsors. We got good sponsors. I've had some sponsors for 30 years, like Sean Field Headers like that. I've got Schaefer Racing Oil like that, and Randy Sweet. And, you know, we got some great sponsors now that come in with me that I've got all day. Willie's Carburetor, Chris Mullinex and CRM Motors. I got D Ford's Bar and Grill. I got FG Lumber Company. Dale's Trailer Sales, some sponsors that I've got nowadays, you've got to have those sponsors to get by. And my crew, you got to thank the crew. I have been blessed for 75 years to have some of the best crew members you'd ever have. I've still got them today. Because without crew members, you're dead. Let me tell you something, though. When we raced, we didn't have that much money short track racing. So, let me tell you, I've had 75 years, and I never had a man on the payroll. Never one has been on the payroll. I covered all the expenses and stuff, but they was not on the payroll. And they said, well, how does that work, make them so good? I said, well, if you've got a man on the payroll, he's got to come to work whether he wants to or not. If you got a guy that volunteers, he comes there to work because he wants to, not because he has to. And that's what makes them good. They come because they want to work. So that's happened to your crew members and the sponsors. You know, to close in, this is my 10th Hall of Fame that I'm in right now. But if I loved all of them. They all mean the world to me when I got them. But you know, this NASCAR Hall of Fame, let's put it this way. If you had a big Christmas tree up there, and every one of these awards that I've got over 75 years was a big ornament, and you put them all around your Christmas tree like that, this NASCAR award is the gold star on top of that Christmas tree. It is the top. Thank you very much.